Raise your right hand, please. You do solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give at this time and place will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
So, Dr. Finkelstein, will you please state and spell your last name for the record?
Finkelstein.
And Dr. Finkelstein, are you currently working with something called the Cerritos Family Clinic?
That was my business entity up until about 2 years ago, and I've moved my office about 2 to 3 miles down the street.
Okay. And what's the current name of your entity?
Stuart Finkelstein, MD.
Sir, do you know if you still maintain the website for the Cerritos Family Clinic?
Yes.
Dr. Finkelstein, have you had a chance to look at Exhibit 1?
Yes, sir.
And is this the home page of the website for the Cerritos Family Clinic?
Yes, sir.
And, I'm sorry, is it called the Cerritos Family Medical Group or the Cerritos Family Clinic?
It was Cerritos Family Medical Group, which existed for about 25 years, and then about 2 years ago, Cerritos Family Medical Group was a practice consisting of myself and my ex-wife, Dr. Petra Wong. We separated approximately 2 years ago and moved to separate offices. I now maintain an office approximately 2 miles from Cerritos Family Medical Group.
Very good. Thank you. And sir, I'm going to represent to you what I did was I had from your website, there were tabs at the top. There's the home page, there's a second tab that's called Addiction Medicine, and it goes from there. I just printed out the entirety of what was listed under each tab, okay? And I'm going to just show you each tab for now, just to get them marked, all right?
Okay.
Okay, so I'm going to hand you Exhibit 2. Oh, I'm sorry.
That's fine.
Thank you.
And sir, I will represent to you Exhibit 2 is the Addiction Medicine tab of Cerritos Family Medical Group. I want you to just take a look at that, and then I'll ask you a very difficult question. Sir, have you had a chance to glance through Exhibit 2?
Yes, sir.
Sir, is Exhibit 2 a printout of the Addiction Medicine tab from the website Cerritos Family Medical Group?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. And sir, I'm going to hand you Exhibit 3. Doctor, have you had a chance to glance through Exhibit 3?
Yes, sir.
Doctor, is Exhibit 3 the printout of the detox medication portion of the Cerritos Family Medical Group website?
Yes, this is the maintaining to alcohol.
Correct. If you look at the top, there's a list of the tabs: home, addiction medicine, detox medicine. Do you see that?
Yes, sir.
And sir, have you had a chance to look at Exhibit 4?
Yes, sir.
And sir, is Exhibit 4 a printout of the other services part of your Cerritos Family Medical Group website?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Almost. Exhibit 5. And sir, I'm just going to ask you the same question. Have you seen enough of Exhibit 5 yet to answer the question I'm going to ask?
Yes, sir.
Okay, sir, is Exhibit 5 the printout of the, what page is that? What is Exhibit 5?
Frequently asked questions.
So is Exhibit 5 a printout of the frequently asked questions part of your website?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And now I'm going to hand you Exhibit 6. And sir, is Exhibit 6 the printout of the links part of your website?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Sir, I'm going to hand you Exhibit 7. And sir, do you see your picture on Exhibit 7?
Yes, sir.
And sir, is Exhibit 7 the printout of the About Us portion of your website?
Yes.
And finally, I'm going to hand you Exhibit 8. And sir, I'm going to ask you, is Exhibit 8 the printout of the Contact Us portion of your website?
Yes, sir.
Now, sir, could you please go back to Exhibit 7, the About Us exhibit with your picture on it? Dr. Finkelstein, are you an expert? I'm sorry, Dr. Finkelstein, are you a specialist in an internal and addiction medicine?
Yes, sir.
And did you get your medical training from UC Davis?
Yes, sir.
And did you do an internship and residency at the Veterans Administration Hospital in Long Beach?
Yes, sir.
And sir, I'd like you to turn back to Exhibit 2, which is the addiction medicine page.
Yes, sir.
And I want you to direct your attention to the first sentence of the second full paragraph, where it says, Dr. Stuart Finkelstein has been a leader in treating addiction for over 20 years. Did I read that correctly?
Yes, sir.
And is that a true statement from
Yes,
your website?
sir.
And so it's a true statement that you've been a leader in treating addiction for over 20 years.
Yes, sir.
And in addition to your internship and residency at the Veterans Administration in Long Beach, what other training have you had?
I was certified by the American Society of Addiction Medicine in 1995. They didn't have a board at that time. It was a certification test. And then subsequently in 2010, it became a board. And now I'm boarded by the American Board of Addiction Medicine, which I should have put on my website.
Okay.
Now that I see that, I'm going to add it to it.
Is there anything else you think you should add to your website in terms of what you've accomplished?
I mean, updates on which hospitals I'm at and which I'm not.
Okay, and so you're as of 2010, you became boarded in addiction medicine. Is that correct?
Correct, sir.
Are you boarded in any other type
No.
of medicine? Okay.
No, sir.
And you were certified in addiction medicine in 1995. Is that correct?
Correct.
Did you keep your certification current up until the time you became boarded?
Yes.
And prior to 1995, were you practicing in addiction medicine?
At that point in time, I was fulfilling my requirements for the certification.
And what were you doing to fulfill the requirements?
I was practicing probably about 50% of my time in addiction medicine, and also attending the CME courses required to take the certification examination.
And what are CME courses?
Continuing medical education.
And for how many years prior to 1995 were you doing? Were you practicing 50% of the time in addiction medicine and attending CME courses? If you can recall.
Well, to sit for the test, it took 2 years full-time experience in addiction medicine, and it took me 4 years to get that. So I guess for 4 years prior to 95.
So from approximately 1991 until 1995.
I started working at a psychiatric facility, providing medical detoxification services for the facility. I was sitting on a credentialing board in 1991 and credentialing someone called an addiction medicine specialist. And at that time I realized I was credentialing myself out of a job, and I decided that I was going to jump through the hoops and take the certification test myself.
And sir, what year did you finish your medical residency?
1983.
And what year did you start working at this psychiatric facility?
1983.
So you finished your medical residency in '83 and you started working at the psychiatric facility. What was the name of that?
There's been a couple, but that was Charter Hospital, Long Beach originally. And then I worked at College Hospital in Cerritos. And then there was one called Alondra Crest. Those would have been the facilities within that time period. can't remember exactly what year, which one was which.
Fair enough. And when you say that time period, you're talking about from 1983 until 1995?
And I guess after, yeah.
And beyond?
And
okay. And so it is fair statement that entire time you were involved in some way or another with addiction medicine?
Yes, sir.
And do you consider yourself an expert in addiction medicine?
Yes, sir.
And you are speaking today as if you are in a court of law in front of a judge and a jury. The same oath you took applies. Do you understand that?
Yes.
When I'm talking about Michael Jackson today, I'm talking about the world famous artist Michael Jackson, who's now passed away. Do you understand that?
Yes, sir.
Now, when I asked you if you met Michael Jackson, is that the one you met?
Yes, sir.
And under what circumstances did you meet Michael Jackson?
I was hired to go on a tour called the Dangerous Tour in 1993, and was in Bangkok. And Michael Jackson came to perform a concert there, and then after he performed the concert, I was requested to go to the principal's hotel room.
And when you say the principal, who are you?
Michael Jackson.
And okay, sir, so who hired you to go on the Dangerous Tour?
I think it was a, God, I just, Mama Promoters was Marcel Avram.
Marcel Avram?
Avram.
A-V-R-A-M.
Yes.
Okay. And when Mr. I said Mr. I'm assuming, Marcel?
Mm-hmm.
And when Mr. Avram hired you to go on the Dangerous Tour, what were you hired, what was your role supposed to be?
I was supposed to be the physician for the crew.
At the time you were hired, were you supposed to also be the physician for the artist? And when I say artist, I'm referring to Michael Jackson.
No.
So, okay, let's just take this step by step. So, how did you get to Bangkok?
An airplane.
Who provided your transportation to Bangkok? Was it the tour? Did you do it on your own dime?
Oh, the tour.
The tour, okay. So the tour bought you a ticket, you came into Bangkok.
Right.
Now, when you got into Bangkok, was Mr. Jackson present in Bangkok?
No.
And at some point in time, did Mr. Jackson become president in Bangkok?
Yes.
And did you meet him when he became president in Bangkok before the time that you just testified to where you went to his room?
No.
Okay. Did you see him in Bangkok before the time you were asked to go to his room?
No.
So you had no physical viewing of him at all?
No, sir.
Okay, so the first time you saw him was when you were asked to go to his room.
Correct.
And who asked you to go to his room?
Probably one of the security guards would have been sent to summon me.
And did you have an understanding of why you were being summoned?
No.
And what did the security guard say to you, if you recall?
You need to go to the principal's hotel room.
Okay. And did you talk to anyone else about going there other than that security guard?
I don't recall who summoned me to the room. Someone summoned me to the hotel room.
Okay. Back to 1993. Did you go to Mr. Jackson's room after you were asked by the security guard?
Yes, sir.
And what did you see?
Mr. Jackson.
Okay. And what was Mr. Jackson doing?
He was in his hotel room. He appeared to be in pain. And then I was put on the phone with his treating physician in Los Angeles.
And who was that?
Alan Metzger.
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 And what did Mr. Metzger say?
Told me that Michael Jackson had a severe headache and he was a lot in pain, and asked me to administer some pain medications.
And what did you say to Mr. Metzger?
Okay.
And did Mr. Metzger inform you what pain medications to administer?
I have no independent recollection. I know what I did, but I don't know.
If he said.
Yeah.
And did you administer pain medications to Mr. Jackson?
Yes, sir.
And what did you administer?
I attempted to give him a shot of Demerol, but his buttocks was so scarred up and abscessed, that the needle almost bent. And at that time, I'm thinking that we were going to have erratic absorption, and that was not a safe route to administer medication to them, because it may accumulate and then all of a sudden dump in the system or not get to them, in which case at that point in time I ran an IV and I administered some IV pain medication.
And do you recall what IV pain medication you administered?
Morphine.
And sir, I noticed from your website there's a lot of mention of opioids. Am I correct?
Correct.
What is an opioid?
Opioid can be natural chemicals or synthetic chemicals that occupy pain receptors of the brain. There's mu, kappa, lambda, and orphan receptors. Opioids are medications that are used to treat pain.
Is Demerol an opioid?
Yes, sir.
And is morphine an opioid?
Yes, sir.
And you're an expert in opioids, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And sir, okay, so at this meeting, when you gave an IV of morphine, what did you do next?
Can I clarify
Please.
the question?
Yeah,
Because
please.
there's a time period.
Okay.
Okay, at that period of time, I wasn't an expert,
Okay, fair enough.
so that needs to be
At
pointed out.
the time you administered
In
the-
1993.
Okay,
Remember, I was studying.
correct. But you were spending half your time working on addiction medicine, and you were taking CME courses at that time.
Correct.
So it's not like you were administering these drugs without knowing what you're doing,
I knew what I was doing,
and you were qualified to administer.
and I was qualified to do it.
So you were qualified at that time, though, to administer both Demerol and morphine, correct?
Correct.
And you were properly licensed to do so, correct?
Correct.
And going back, so at this, what would you call this? A meeting in his room, or a consultation, or how would you characterize it?
I spent the next 24 hours, approximately 24 hours in this room, intermittently administering medication until that Mr. Jackson was capable of going on stage and performing the second concert that we were scheduled to do in Bangkok. We did postpone that concert.
Okay, so let's go to this 24-hour period that you spent in Mr. Jackson's room. You state you were intermittently administering medication, correct?
Correct.
And what were the medications you were administering, if there was more than one?
It was morphine and IV fluids.
And was Mr. Jackson conscious during this time?
Yes.
And was he speaking to you?
Yes.
And what was he speaking about, if you recall?
We were watching Three Stooges and having squirt gun fights and talking about growing up in Encino on Havenhurst. He lived next door to a young woman that I dated in high school.
Okay. And at some point in time, did you become confident or believe that Mr. Jackson could continue on the tour? Is that a bad question? If you don't understand, if you don't understand, tell me.
That's a bad question.
Fair enough. I'm just trying to go through time here. So you're in the room for 24 hours, right?
Approximately.
And then I believe you said you were administering the medication until you felt he could.
Until he went on stage.
Okay. And did he go on stage as soon as this 24-hour time period ended?
Approximately.
And did you watch him on stage?
Yes.
Was he able to perform?
Yes.
And did he look okay to you?
Yes.
Okay. Now, I think you mentioned something about the show being postponed.
Yes.
What show was postponed?
The concert, the second concert that was scheduled in Bangkok.
And do you know how long it was postponed?
a day or two.
And was it postponed at your recommendation?
Yes.
And who did you make that recommendation to?
I met with, I would have met with the promoter, Marcel Avram, and there was someone under Marcel Avram. And then I was on CNN. And there was a publicist there. And the publicist said, okay, we're going to, the sound bite is that Michael Jackson's dehydrated. And then, so then I was asked to go out in front of a CNN camera, and I said that Michael Jackson put so much effort into his shows in this hot environment that he's dehydrated.
Was Mr. Jackson in fact dehydrated?
Yes.
But was Mr. Jackson suffering from anything else other than dehydration?
I thought that I would have guessed that I thought he had an opiate problem.
And when you say a problem, do you mean a dependency?
Correct, sir.
And did you have an understanding of what opiates Mr. Jackson was dependent on?
The way that you asked that question is a tough question for me.
Okay. Did you have an understanding of what I was trying to ask you?
I think so.
Why don't you answer what you think I was trying to ask you?
Michael Jackson had a 100 microgram Duragesic patch on, and there were 2 ampules of Demerol that were sent with another member of the crew intended for Mr. Jackson.
And so why are you telling me that?
I don't know.
Okay. Well, did
You asked me why I thought there was a problem. So I have someone that I feel that that obviously has received a lot of medication in the past, that has a high tolerance to medication. He had high tolerance when I administered the medication. So, and obviously I was early in my training, but in my training enough that it created concern for me.
understood. Okay, so did you see Mr. Jackson wearing a Demerol patch?
It was a Duragesic patch.
Could you spell that one?
Duragesic, also called fentanyl, Fentyl.
And how is that patch related to Demerol?
It's another opiate.
And so is that patch separate from, you just testified something about 2 milliliters of Demerol or something?
Ampule.
2 ampules of Demerol, okay. How does the 2 ampules, what were you talking about, the 2 ampules of Demerol?
2 ampules of Demerol.
Right, but was that present or was that part of the patch? I'm not a doctor.
Oh, no,
I'm not a doctor, the jury's not a doctor, so I'm trying to dumb this down for myself and the world here.
okay.
Okay, so,
We're talking about opiates.
yes, sir.
We're talking about natural opiates and synthetic opiates. Both medications are opiates. The delivery system is different. The patch, the medication is absorbed through the skin. The ampules need to be injected.
Okay. And where did you see the ampules?
They were given to me by the the makeup artist here.
Was her name Karen Fay?
Yes.
Okay. So Karen Fay gave you 2 ampules of Demerol? Is that
Correct.
And did she give any instruction to you when she gave you those?
No.
Did you have any discussion with Miss Fay about the ampules of Demerol?
Not that I can recall anything about, but if she's given me 2 ampules of Demerol, I must have had some sort of discussion, but I don't recall it.
When she gave you the 2 ampules of Demerol, was it your understanding that those were for Mr. Jackson?
Correct, sir.
So, based on seeing the patch and the 2 ampules of Demerol, were those factors that led you to believe that Mr. Jackson had a dependency on opiates?
Yes.
Why don't we run through the four factors? I think you also testified to one more, but let's run through the factors that led you to believe that Mr. Jackson had a dependency on opiates, okay? We have the patch, is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Is that a yes?
Yes.
Okay, no problem. We had the 2 ampules of Demerol that were given to you by Karen Fay.
Yes.
We have your observation that Mr. Jackson had a high tolerance, is that correct?
Yes.
And then also you testified about scarring on Mr. Jackson's buttocks. Was that a factor that led you to believe that he might have a problem with opiates?
Yes.
And what about the scarring led you to believe that?
He obviously had multiple injections in his buttocks prior to arriving in Bangkok.
Now, sir, when you were treating Mr. Jackson for this approximate 24-hour period, did you ask him any questions about his opiate usage?
Not extensively. It was mostly that what Dr. Meltzer had told me to do.
And you say not extensively. Do you remember any conversation you had with Mr. Jackson?
No.
Was Mr. Gongware the tour manager of that tour?
Mr. Gongaware was, I don't know exactly what his title was, but Mr. Gongaware was my friend, and how I became involved, and he, I guess it was the tour manager.
So, do you know Mr. Paul Gongware?
Yes, sir.
And how is it that you know Mr. Gongware?
He used to be the road manager for Rick James when my older brother was representing some concerts, I think a company called Concerts West. And we used to go skiing on a John Denver Pro-Am ski tournament every year, in which case Mr. Gongaware and I became friends because we both have an avid passion for skiing. Mr. Gongaware then left my brother's firm and went to work for Warren Miller and brought me along. And I've been skiing with Mr. Gongaware for the last 20, 30 years.
So you mentioned that it was Mr. Gongware is how you got involved in the Dangerous Tour?
Yes, sir.
And how do you know that?
How else would they know me?
So do you believe that Mr. Gongware suggested you as a doctor to come on the tour?
Yeah,
Was it Mr. Gongware who called you to go on the tour, or did somebody else call you?
Mr. Gongaware.
And when Mr. Gongware called you to go on the Dangerous Tour, what did he say? If you recall.
I don't recall.
Okay. Generally, what was the conversation in regards to?
Going on the tour, going on a rock tour.
Was compensation discussed?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And did you have an understanding based on that conversation as to who was going to be providing the compensation?
The promoter,
And you believe that was Marcel?
Avon.
Avram, okay, got it. And sir, when the second Bangkok show got postponed, was it Mr. Gongaware who postponed the show?
I thought I postponed it.
Okay. Well, did you inform Mr. Gongaware of the situation with the artist?
Yes, sir.
And what did you tell Mr. Gongaware in regard to the situation with the artist?
I said, I think we're going to have a problem.
And did you elaborate on that?
I'm going to say yes, but I wouldn't know exactly what I said.
Well, did you tell Mr. Gongware you thought that Mr. Jackson had a dependency on opiates?
Yes.
And what did Mr. Gongware say to you?
He said, don't be a Dr. Nick.
And by Dr. Nick, was he talking about Elvis?
Yes, sir.
And who is Dr. Nick?
I don't remember his last name, but he was Elvis's doctor, and I think Elvis died with like 14 different chemicals in his system. And he's kind of warning me that, don't get all infatuated where you start administering meds to a rock star and have the rock star overdose and die on you.
So was it your understanding by Mr. Gongware's comment regarding Dr. Nick that Mr. Gongware knew that you were providing Mr. Jackson with some opiates?
I think when I tried to administer the medication, and his butt was abscessed. You know, I said, I was trying to give a heads up to the promoters that we were probably going to have a situation on tour.
And did you give them that heads up?
Yes.
And when you're talking about promoters, were you talking also about Mr. Gongaware?
I would assume that he would have been in the meeting.
So at this meeting, you informed the promoters, including Mr. Gongaware, about the issue with Michael Jackson's buttocks?
That was my opinion.
Okay. But you did inform them?
Mm-hmm.
Is that a yes?
Yes.
And did you inform them that Michael Jackson had a dependency on opiates?
You're calling me to speculate at the time. I gave them what my speculation was. Nobody believed me.
Okay, but yeah, no, it's okay. Okay, but you told them that you believe that Michael Jackson had a dependency on opiates, correct?
Correct.
And Mr. Gongaware was at that meeting, correct?
I would have made that statement to Mr. Gongaware, but
And-
I don't know if he was at that meeting.
But okay, but at some point you made the statement to him, and he made the Dr. Nick comment, correct?
Right.
And you said nobody believed you. Could you elaborate on that?
I was not hired as an addiction medicine specialist. I was hired as a family doctor to treat the crew. And then all of a sudden, I come in here, and in my first meeting, I come up with this statement. And nobody believed me.
And you had Michael Jackson's best interests at heart, correct?
Correct.
And as a physician, the patient's interests is your primary concern, correct?
Correct.
And because of that, you felt it appropriate to inform the promoters, including Mr. Gongaware, of your concerns, correct?
Correct.
And at some point, did they come to believe you?
Yes.
At what point did they come to believe you?
Mexico City.
Was Mexico City part of the Dangerous Tour?
Yes, sir.
And what happened in Mexico City?
After I took care of Mr. Jackson and he went on stage, another doctor from England came and assumed responsibility for Mr. Jackson. And we were in Mexico City for a 3-week period of time. And I came back from a trip to the pyramids, and my suitcase, of which I had all my medications in, was broken into. And at that time, the doctor, told me that he had broken into my suitcase to get medications. And he was a little concerned that he didn't want to get kind of blamed for a problem that he felt that he inherited, and that we started to kind of collaborate because we didn't want to take the hit for something that somebody else had done before us, and we started to strategize on how to deal with the situation.
And did you come up with a strategy?
I came up with my strategy.
What was that?
I wanted to, detox him in a chalet in Switzerland and go on with the tour.
And and this other doctor from England, was that a man named Dr. Forecast?
Correct.
And did Dr. Forecast tell you why he broke into your suitcase?
To get the medication.
Why did he need the medication so badly that he broke into your suitcase to get it?
He didn't have any.
But who was the medication for?
I had a suitcase full of whatever medication I thought that 160 people would need traveling around the world. So, I tried to anticipate any problem that could happen, to be prepared to deal with 160 people in third world countries and anywhere around the world.
Okay, I understand. But did Dr. Forecast break into your suitcase to get any specific medication, if you know?
Yes.
What specific medication did he break into your suitcase to get?
The pain meds.
The Demerol?
I don't recall if it was Demerol or morphine or both.
Okay. And did he break in to get the pain medication to give it to Mr. Jackson?
Yes.
So you saw Dr. Forecast give the medication to Mr. Jackson?
Yes, sir.
And we're now in Mexico City?
Yes, sir.
Was that the first time you met Dr. Forecast?
No.
Was he on the tour with you in Bangkok?
He joined after Bangkok, or it would have been, it might have been, the next stop was Singapore. Again, does it really matter whether it was Singapore or Bangkok?
Fair enough.
But it was right afterwards.
Okay. We'll go back to him joining. Okay. But in Mexico City, you saw Dr. Forecast administering the medication to Michael Jackson, correct?
Correct.
And, okay, then let's go on with the Mexico City story. Then what happened?
They got together, the head powers got together. They called in Elizabeth Taylor to do an intervention. And it's my understanding and belief they took Michael to the best hospital in the world, which they believe to be Charter Nightingale in London.
Now, when you say the powers that be got together, who are you talking about?
I don't know, but it was the people above my pay grade.
But the promoters of the show?
I don't know if it's promoters, managers.
Was Paul Gongware part of that group?
I would not know.
Okay. Did Mr. Jackson collapse or something in Mexico City? Was there an issue or just what happened? I mean,
He did not collapse.
Okay.
It seemed that Dr. Forecast was having a harder and harder time keeping up with the demand for the pain medications. Also, at that time in Mexico City, I do recall that there was a videotaped interview for a deposition concerning a Chandler on a child molestation charge, and at that time they had a videotaped deposition in Mexico.
of Mr. Jackson.
Correct.
Were you present at that
In the
deposition?
in the deposition
Yes, sir.
itself, no.
And did that deposition cause Mr. Jackson some stress?
Yes.
And do you believe that stress also increased his urge to take the opiates?
Yes.
And so there was no collapsing or anything in Mexico City. It was just based on Michael, your overall observations of Michael that led to a cancellation. Is that what happened?
Intervention.
Intervention. And so did Elizabeth Taylor actually physically come to Mexico City?
Yes.
Did you speak with her?
No.
Were any of the shows in Mexico City canceled?
If they weren't canceled, they were postponed. I don't know exactly how many we were scheduled, but I know that we had an extended stay in Mexico City, much longer than was anticipated.
And I'm assuming you weren't involved in things like tickets or refunding tickets or moving tickets or anything like that, right?
No, sir.
Okay. Now, did you have an understanding of what Dr. Forecast's role was on the tour?
You're calling me to speculate?
No, I'm saying, based on you being there and observing what was going on, did you gain some understanding what his role was? And I'm not asking you what his title was, or what did you see him doing? What was his role?
He took care of the principal, Mr. Jackson.
Do you know who was employing Dr. Forecast?
For sure, or for my speculation?
Oh, for sure, for sure. I mean, do you know what? Do you know who was paying his checks?
No, I don't.
Was Mr. Gongaware in Mexico City?
Yes, sir.
Well, did you speak to Mr. Gongaware a lot on this tour?
He's my friend.
Okay. Did you talk to him every day, pretty much on the tour?
Pretty much.
And would you talk to him about what was going on with the artist?
Yes.
So, is it a fair assumption that you would have told Mr. Gongaware what was going on with Mr. Jackson's opiate problems on the tour?
Yes.
Okay. You stayed in Mexico City.
I went home.
You went home, okay. And you were living in LA at that time?
Correct.
Okay. Do you know if the rest of the tour group went home or stayed, or do you know?
We all went home.
So that was the end of your involvement in the Dangerous Tour.
Correct.
Do you know how long time it was between the time you were in Bangkok until the time you were in Mexico City?
Approximately 3.5 months.
Okay. Now, in that 3.5 months, was the tour continuing to go from city to city?
Correct.
And you were on the tour that entire time?
Correct.
And was Dr. Forecast on the tour that entire time?
Correct.
And were either you or Dr. Forecast administering pain medication to Mr. Jackson the entire time?
I know that I administered pain medication one other time when Dr. Forecast was not available, and then I know that I saw Dr. Forecast administer medication in Mexico City during the deposition, and Dr. Forecast and I were kind of in communication because he didn't kind of want to take the hit for what other doctors had done before him.
And did you have an understanding that Mr. Jackson had previously had a burn injury on his head?
Yes.
What is the basis for your understanding that Mr. Jackson had a burn injury on his head?
Pepsi Cola commercial.
And what's the basis for your understanding that Mr. Jackson started taking pain medication after the burn injury?
Maybe conversations with Karen Fay?
And what about conversations with Dr. Metzger?
No.
What about conversations with the artist?
No.
What about Dr. Forecast?
No.
Okay. Could you pull out Exhibit 5, which is a page from your website? And sir, I believe you previously testified that this was your frequently asked questions page from your website. Do you see that?
Yes.
Okay. And I want to ask you. The second question is substance abuse a character flaw? Do you see that?
Yes.
And I assume, as an addiction medicine specialist, that's a question you get asked a lot, and that's why it's on your frequently asked questions page, right?
Yes.
Now, is it a character flaw for someone to be addicted to an opiate?
No.
And why not?
Because I believe it to be a brain disease. I believe that there's two different types. People are genetically predisposed because their body does not produce enough endogenous endorphins. And then I believe that people that get enough exposure to these chemicals their brain changes so that they become physiologically dependent upon them.
Now, of those two different types of people that you just mentioned, did you have enough interaction and observation of Michael Jackson to determine which of those two camps he fell in?
I did not have enough information or observation to make that conclusion.
Okay, but you were able to determine that you felt that he had a dependency on opiates, correct?
Correct.
He either had a genetic predisposition to it or his brain changed because he had been taking it, correct?
Correct.
If a person were to try to make the argument that the reason Michael Jackson was dependent on opiates was because he was a weak person, would you agree with that?
No.
And can you explain to us your impression of Mr. Jackson as a person?
He was a sweetheart. Kind, gentle, fun.
Was he one of these artists you hear about who are yelling at people and demanding things and acting like that on tour?
No.
Was he kind to everybody? From the lowest, based on your observation, was he kind to everybody?
Based on my observation, he was kind to everybody.
And he didn't treat people bad because they might have been at a lower rank of the tour, correct?
Correct.
So for that period between Bangkok and Mexico City, that approximately 3 to 3.5 month period, correct?
Correct.
Was Mr. Gongware on that tour the whole time?
Yes.
And you had frequent interactions with Mr. Gongware that whole time?
Yes.
And it was your understanding that Mr. Gongware was aware of the opiate problems that Mr. Jackson was having, correct?
Yes.
And did you ever discuss with Mr. Gongaware your thoughts on how you could perhaps, help Michael get better?
We would have had that discussion with Dr. Forecast.
And do you remember what was discussed?
We felt that we needed to do an intervention. He needed to be detoxed.
And is that what led to Elizabeth Taylor coming into Mexico City?
Yes.
Now I see. Were there any, between Bangkok and Mexico City, were there any show postponements or cancellations that you recall?
Yes.
Can you recall specifically any of the other show postponements or cancellations between Bangkok and Mexico City?
There were frequent postponements and cancelizations.
When the intervention happened and the shows were canceled in Mexico City, right? Are you with me?
Yes.
Okay. And that intervention happened because of that conversation you talked about where you said we needed an intervention because of the opiates, correct?
No, that happened because Dr. Forecast, remember this was in Bangkok and on visit 1 and nobody believed anything I said.
After Mexico City, okay, you never rejoined the Dangerous Tour.
Correct.
Do you know if the Dangerous Tour continued on?
It did not.
After the Dangerous Tour, did you ever work on any other tours with Michael Jackson?
No.
After the Dangerous Tour, did you ever work on any other tours at all?
Tours? No.
No. Did you ever work on any music-related events?
Frequently.
And could you give me examples of some that you worked on?
I frequently go out to get called out to like the Staples Center. Someone has a sore throat, someone gets pneumonia, someone sprains an ankle. I was there within the last 2 weeks.
So that's currently happening.
Yeah.
And are you say you go to the Staples Center, are you being called out by AEG or AEG Live personnel?
I'm being called out by promoters as a rock doc. Could be AEG, could be Golden Voice. I don't know, but somehow my name is out there and I get called.
Okay.
And I don't know specifically who calls me or why they call me, but probably because I've been doing it for 30 years.
And have you been called down to Orange County to do similar work?
Yes.
When did that start? That you started getting called out to Staples Center to work as a rock doc?
It kind of started back in well, it's not Staples Center. I can't even remember when Staples Center was built, but it's probably since 1980 or 83 when my older brother was managing Concerts West.
And you testified you did no other tours with Michael Jackson.
Correct.
Were you ever contacted by anybody to, in regard to another Michael Jackson tour?
Yes.
And when did that happen?
It was probably sometime within a month to 2 months before his death.
Before Mr. Jackson's death?
Yeah, I don't remember. I mean, that's a time for you to...
Fair enough. I'll represent to you that he died on June 25th, 2009. Okay? Does that sound right? Don't guess. I'll just tell you. He died on June 25th, 2009. Okay? So just to put us in some perspective. So assuming that I'm correct that Mr. Jackson died on June 25th, 2009, your testimony is you were contacted how long before that?
Month to 2 months.
And who contacted you?
Paul Gongaware.
And what did Mr. Gongaware say?
Hey, Stuart, you may have another chance. Michael's doing another tour to London, and he's going to want to take a physician.
And what did you say back?
Great.
Were you interested in going on that tour to London?
Very much so.
And tell me about the rest of that conversation.
That Michael, one of the
Let me ask this. How many conversations did you have with Mr. Gongaware regarding the London tour?
estimate 5 to 10.
Okay. So what else do you remember about those conversations?
I remember asking if he thought Michael was clean.
You asked Mr. Gongaware that.
Correct.
Okay. And what did Mr. Gongaware say?
He thought yes.
Why did you ask that?
Because if that wasn't the case, I would not have been interested in going on tour.
Got it. Because you didn't want a repeat of what happened in Dangerous, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And
I didn't want to be a Dr. Nick.
you asked Mr. Gongaware if he thought Michael was clean. Mr. Gongaware said he thought he was.
He was clean.
Okay. Tell me what else you remember about the conversations.
I wanted to know why he thought that. He said because he had a physical from an insurance company, and that he had passed it. I guess he was in contact with the physician that was currently with Michael, and that physician was telling him that everything was good and Michael was strong and ready to go.
And you know
And he also asked me what I would charge to go on tour.
And what did you tell him you would charge?
40 grand a month, 10 grand a week.
And did Mr. Gongaware make it clear to you that he wanted you to go on the tour?
Mr. Gongaware is my friend. I would imagine that he would want me to go on the tour.
But he asked you to go on the tour.
He would have wanted me to go on the tour, yes.
Did he ask you to go on the tour?
He was working on getting it so that I could go on the tour.
Obviously, you ended up not becoming part of the This Is It tour. Is that correct?
Correct.
And as part of these 5 to 10 conversations you had with Mr. Gongaware, were you ever informed that you were not going to be hired to be on the tour?
I must have been.
Do you remember it specifically?
No.
Okay. Do you remember how you learned that you were not going to be the doctor to go on the tour?
I was never hired.
Are you? I'm trying to ask now what you learned from actually speaking to Mr. Gongaware as opposed to what you may have learned after the fact. So my question was, do you recall if Mr. Gongaware told you what Dr. Murray was asking for to do the tour?
I remember that it was a lot of money.
Okay. And then he told you some amount of money, you think?
Yes.
Okay. Did you, in these conversations, did you discuss with Mr. Gongaware the past problems you both knew about regarding Michael and his opiate dependence?
I think I testified that to earlier. I asked him if he was clean.
But did you talk more about it? Did you elaborate on it with him?
Well, he elaborated to me that he thought that Michael was clean because, and the reason was he had passed an insurance physical. And
Right,
you would
okay.
assume that you would check for something like that.
I was just trying to ask if on that topic, was there any further discussion like, oh, remember what happened in Bangkok or anything like that? Do you know what I'm saying?
Not really. I mean, obviously we remember what happened in Bangkok.
Okay, so it was understood between the two of you that you both knew what happened in Bangkok.
Correct.
Doctor, is propofol an opioid?
No.
Okay. Based on your experience in addiction medicine and expertise in opioids, would someone who is opioid dependent seek out other drugs other than opioids to help sort of curb their problems?
Yes.
Now explain that to me.
Very common.
And how does it work with the opiate dependent person?
For some reason, they seem to gravitate to GABA receptor drugs, and it's probably because GABA receptor drugs are going to potentiate the effects of opiates, and they're also very helpful in bridging the the abstinence syndrome that occurs when you stop opiates.
And what are some examples of GABA receptor drugs?
Those would be your tranquilizers, Xanax, Ativan, Valium, Librium, Tranxene, Cirax. That would also include your barbiturates.
And what are some examples of barbiturates?
Fiornol, and the propofol would work on those receptors too.
And is propofol a barbiturate?
It's not really a barbiturate, but
But it's a GABA receptor drug.
correct.
So would a person who has an opiate dependence, based on your experience, seek out propofol?
Propofol has a very bad, there's not a lot of cases of propofol dependency because it's just not readily available. Nobody knows about it. Usually on the cases of propofol dependency, it's going to occur with a doctor or a nurse anesthetist or someone associated in the medical community. It has a really high percentage of fatality rate. You can't play around with that drug. If you go through the literature, it can be, about an 80% mortality rate. It's a very dangerous drug to use outside a OR setting. There's no reversing agents to it. If someone takes too much, you have to be ready to place them on a ventilator and supplement their breathing. There are some, studies of about like 80 cases of propofol dependency that have been reported. At one point in time, I knew all the exact statistics and don't have it exactly in my mind right now.
Okay, that was impressive though. So what about alcohol? Do people who have opiate dependence sometimes abuse alcohol as well?
Alcohol would be considered another GABA receptor type drug.
Now, you were talking about how sometimes you see an abuse of propofol in people who have access to propofol, like doctors, nurses, etc. Right?
Correct.
Okay. And is that, we were talking earlier about how people with opiate dependence are not bad people just because of their opiate dependence. Do you recall that? You can answer.
Correct.
Okay. And based on your experience, do you see people from all walks of life who have opiate dependence?
Correct.
Doctors,
Correct.
lawyers,
Correct.
judges,
Correct.
mothers,
Correct.
fathers.
Correct.
Did you watch any of the Conrad Murray criminal trial on TV?
No.
Okay. Did you read any newspaper articles about the Conrad Murray criminal trial?
Yes.
Okay. So you would never have done what Dr. Murray did, correct?
Correct.
Dr. Finkelstein, you used the expression in our earlier session, rock doc. Do you recall doing that?
Yes.
What is a rock doc?
I don't really know, but they put the American Medical Newsletter had me on the front page of the cover as the rock doc.
Are there other people who are considered rock docs in the
Yes.
industry? Okay. Do you know some of them?
There's someone in Texas that I get a call from periodically. I guess, I don't know how your name gets on their list, and I don't know why they call. It's usually a major inconvenience.
Who's the doctor in Texas?
I don't know his name, but I know that he's called me and said, hey, there's somebody here. Can you go to this venue? And
Did you get into the rock doc business from Paul Gondwer?
no, I think I got in it from Bob Finkelstein.
From Bob, okay. Got it. And Bob Finkelstein used to be partners with Mr. Gondwer.
No, Mr. Gongor was a road manager when Bob Finkelstein, I think, was president of Concerts West or can't help me out, huh?
I understand.
Management 3.
Management 3. Okay, got it. Okay. I'm gonna ask you if you know some people. Okay. Do you know Brandon or Randy Phillips?
Yes.
Who is Randy Phillips?
He has something to do with the Ann Schultz Entertainment Group.
And how is it that you know Mr. Phillips?
I've seen him at birthday parties. I saw him at a birthday party for John Meglin. I know that he works, I don't know what his job title is or exactly what he does, but I know that he works for AEG.
Have you ever seen him at one of these shows where you're acting as the rock doc?
Besides in the hallway and, high and social.
Right, yeah, I mean,
Yes, have I ever had a meaningful conversation with him? No.
did you ever give him a flu shot?
Possibly,
Okay.
probably. I would have done that.
Okay, and back to the conversations you had with Mr. Gongaware in relation to the This Is It tour. I don't know if I finished asking you questions. Other than what we've discussed already, was anything else discussed with regard to those conversations?
Yeah.
I apologize. Let me go back to my notes and see if
We
I
would have discussed skiing conditions. We would have discussed the difference between Snowbird and Mammoth and who had the best powder.
Maybe an easy way to do this is if I ask some specific questions. Were things like, was it discussed, for example, whether housing would be provided for you in London?
No,
Was it discussed how, whether transportation would be provided for you to go to London?
no, there weren't a lot of discussions on the details. I didn't get hired.
Oh, okay, right. Got it. And I believe you testified before that you weren't told by Mr. Gongaware why you were not getting hired, correct?
Correct. Well, yeah, yes, I was. I think Michael wanted someone else.
Well, but I'm not asking what Mr. Gongaware told you.
I think he told me that Michael wanted a different doctor.
Did Mr. Gongaware tell you that Dr. Murray was a cardiologist?
I don't recall any conversation of that. I didn't get the job.
Okay.
Mr. Ngongo was my friend. I enjoyed being on tour. He was trying to get me the job. I didn't get it.
And it's your understanding that Dr. Murray got the job, not you?
Correct.
Just a few follow-up questions about some of the issues that you were testifying about before the lunch break. You testified that your initial administration of medication to Mr. Jackson in Bangkok was morphine that you provided intravenously intermittently over a 24-hour period. Do you recall that testimony?
The initial shot was Demerol. The subsequent shot was morphine.
Do you recall what dosage of Demerol you provided?
I recall that it would have been a range from 50 to 100.
And is that a typical starting dose for someone who's naive to opiates?
Yes.
And did you administer that shot in his Mr. Jackson's buttocks?
Correct.
Okay. You testified that there was a significant amount of scarring there, and that was one of the bases for your concern that he had an opiate dependence issue.
Correct.
Are you able to estimate or opine sort of how many shots he had and over what time period based on the scarring that you saw?
Significant.
Okay.
Extensive.
And are there other types of medications other than opiates that are typically administered in the buttocks? Why did you think it was an opiate, sign of an opiate dependence issue?
Because he had a Durgesic patch on, and because there was another person on tour that had 2 ampules of Demerol that were not in his name, but that was sent with him.
And each ampule of Demerol, there were 2, I believe you said?
I believe that there were 2.
Do you recall in whose name the Demerol was prescribed, or if there was a name on the Demerol ampules?
Yes.
Do you know the name?
Yes.
Whose name was it?
Karen Fay.
But I believe you testified you understood that the Demerol was not for Ms. Fay, it was for Mr. Jackson.
Correct?
Do you recall that doctor's name?
Alan Metzger.
And that's the doctor that you spoke with by phone the first time you treated Michael in Bangkok, correct?
Correct.
Getting back to the time that you treated Mr. Jackson in Bangkok, do you recall what the morphine dosage you administered was?
10 milligrams.
And did you administer repeated 10 milligram doses?
Yes.
Do you recall approximately how many over the 24-hour period?
No.
Is 10 milligrams a typical starting dose for morphine?
No.
What's the typical starting dose?
2 to 4.
Did you administer 10 because you had observed that Mr. Jackson had a high tolerance for morphine?
Yes. For opiates.
For opiates. Did Mr. Jackson say anything to you with regard to his opiate tolerance, or did you determine the dose based purely on your observation of how he reacted to the medication?
I based the dose purely on the observation of how he responded to the first injection.
Okay. And did you have any doubt that Mr. Jackson was actually suffering pain at the time you administered those pain medications to him?
No, I believed he was in pain.
Okay. Did you ever administer pain medication to Mr. Jackson at a time when you didn't believe he was experiencing pain?
No.
Just because I asked that with a lot of negatives, let me rephrase it in the affirmative. Every time you administered pain medication to Mr. Jackson, did you believe he was suffering pain at that time?
Yes.
Okay. You were asked about what Mr. Gongaware knew about Mr. Jackson's opiate issues during the dangerous tour. Do you remember that series of questions?
Yes.
Do you remember having any setting aside that first meeting in Bangkok that you believe Mr. Gongaware attended where you spoke about your concern that Michael had an opiate issue? Do you remember any other specific conversations that you had with Mr. Gongaware about Mr. Jackson and opiates during the 3.5 approximately months between Bangkok and when the tour disbanded in Mexico City?
No.
Okay. So to the extent that you testified that Mr. Gongaware may have known what was going on, it was based on what you said to him and others in Bangkok with regard to your concern about Mr. Jackson's opiate dependency.
Correct.
Did you ever administer propofol to Michael Jackson?
No.
You testified that you were joined the Dangerous Tour in 1993. Do you have any understanding as to whether the Dangerous Tour had multiple legs?
Yes.
And did you join the third leg of that Dangerous Tour only?
I joined the tour that went from Bangkok to Mexico City, and you have I see that you pulled the Wikipedia that has the dates on that, and I was the doctor for the segment that went from Bangkok to Mexico City. I went as a tourist to Switzerland and France on another leg, but I had no interaction. It was just visiting and hanging out and going to the shows.
Okay. So you understood the leg that you were on not to be the first leg of the Dangerous Tour, correct?
Correct.
I believe you testified previously, but I'm not sure that you didn't participate in the intervention in Mexico City. Is that correct? You did not participate?
That's correct.
Okay. In 1993, while you were treating Michael on the Dangerous Tour, did you ever come to believe or suspect he wasn't being forthright with you about his medical care?
My interactions with Michael were very limited. As
Okay.
I said, Dr. Forecast was more to speak, the attending physician.
What physicians visited on tour? Do you remember any of their names?
Arnie Klein and Hofflin. I believe it was Might have been Steve Hoffman?
Do you remember when on the tours they visited?
No, sir, I don't. No, ma'am, I don't.
And you referred to there being more problems with Michael after they visited. Can you be a bit more specific about what those problems were?
The shows would be delayed.
Did Dr. Forecast ever say to you in effect that that Michael was secretive about his medical care and what drugs were being administered?
Everything was secretive.
What do you mean by that?
It seems that, never did one doc know, it seems like nobody ever knew the whole story. Everything was compartmentalized and people were separated and segregated.
Other than the phone call that you testified to in Bangkok with Dr. Metzger, did you ever speak to Dr. Metzger at any other time about Jackson's medical care?
Speak with him? No.
Did you ever correspond with him in writing?
Yes.
Okay. Approximately when and how many times?
Once, 1995.
Okay. And what was the nature of that correspondence?
Brad Buxer had called me and asked me to go see Michael because he was in pain. And I went, and Michael had back pain. I administered a shot, and then I went on a dive trip. And at some time, he canceled a rehearsal, and then for some reason, Dr. Metzger contacted, got into play. I had a record which I faxed over or my office faxed over to Dr. Metzger on my examination and what went down.
You were answering some questions regarding at the point in time when you were administering first Demerol and then morphine to Mr. Jackson in Bangkok. Okay, are you with me?
Correct.
Okay, so did you have with you some sort of antidote for those medications?
Yes.
And what was that antidote?
Narcan.
Could you spell that?
Narcan.
Now was that antidote, was it taped to the bedpost
In Bangkok?
or anywhere?
No, I administered a dose of medication in Mexico City when Dr. Forecast wasn't around. And at that time, if I'm going to administer a medication, I'm going to have a safety plan.
And so where did you get the antidote?
And I brought it.
And sir, you were asked some questions that brought out the answers that Dr. Klein came to visit on the Dangerous Tour. Do you recall that?
Correct.
Do you know how long Dr. Klein was there on the tour?
He would come in for a few days repetitively.
And would you spend any time with Dr. Klein while he
Not
was
at
there?
all.
You would not?
No.
What about Dr. Hoffman? How long did he come on the tour? How long did, sorry. How long or frequently did Dr. Hoffman come visit on the Dangerous Tour?
He came, I had to wait for you to finish talking. He came a couple times and it would be for a weekend.
Okay. Did you spend any time with Dr. Hoffman when he was visiting on the Dangerous Tour?
No.
Okay. You were not on the history tour, is that correct?
Correct.
Setting aside those documents, okay, do you have any other documents regarding Michael Jackson, like, for example, any medical records of the medicines you administered in Bangkok?
No.
And why is that you don't have any records?
For those particular records?
Yes, sir.
Because they were stolen in Istanbul.
Oh, okay. So you made records at the time you administered the medications?
Correct.
And did you also make records in Mexico City?
Yes. No, in Mexico City, I kept a record of everything, a journal of everything I did along the tour, and I was backstage in a secure environment, kind of like my back to here, and the door was there, and I had my records there, and those records were stolen in Istanbul. And then I did have some records that when I came back from Mexico City that I left at my mom's house that I really have tried to find and retrieve, but I have been unable to. And then I had records from one visit in 1995, but my records got filed, and if you don't see someone in 7 to 10 years, I have a service that just, so my records from 95 got culled out by just the routine business of having lots of medical records, and if you haven't seen anybody in a certain length of time, they dispose of them.
Understand. So all those records that you were just talking about, were you talking about records of treating Michael Jackson?
Mm-hmm.
Is that a yes?
Yes.
Okay. So basically, any records you may have from treating Michael Jackson were either stolen in Istanbul, misplaced in your mother's house, or else just destroyed per the natural passage of time after not having seen a patient.
Correct.
Okay. Could you tell me about the visit you had with Michael Jackson in 1995?
I got called by Brad Buxer telling me that Michael had a lot of pain. I went to see him. He was in back spasm, administered a shot, and then I left.
Was this the same visit you were just talking about with Ms. Cahan, the back pain?
Yes.